So we have the cylinder or the tank already mounted up and ready to go. It's centered in the tube. Now what I did was calculated the volume of the tank at 14 mils and then calculated the volume of the ID of the tube at 125, 126 mils. Subtracting the two gives me approximately 56 mils of part A and part B. Using the water technique of a known measuring container, I poured that into a smaller cup, marked it, and then used that cup to mark 2 more cups that I have now transferred in mixed part A and part B into. I'll take those 2 containers, transfer them into this, mix it up with my craft stick that has the rounded tip, cut off it so that I can scrape the corners of the glass, and then I will go ahead and pour carefully to minimize the air bubbles. And I'm not going to do it on camera because I think that's part of what caused me issue, was working around the camera stand. I've not really had air bubble issues before when I've made molds, so I think that could have been a contributing factor. So I'm going to do this one with no camera running, and once it's loaded up and ready to go, I'm going to put it in the pressure pot, which I've already leveled so that I know it's going to be flat. And then I've already set my little tankless compressor up, and I've tested it for leaks, and I'm going to be able to get about 48 psi. The pressure relief valve seems to be lower than I anticipated. It keeps tripping at 50 and then it just lets go. So I've got the regulator set to about 48, and hopefully the relief valve won't be leaking on me. I'll have to look into replacing that with a higher a valve of higher value. Now I'll go ahead and pour, and when I'll save you all the noise of the compressor loading up, because it will be very loud. I won't subject you to that. I'll bring you back once I've released the pressure out of the pot and we're ready to pull the mold and see how well our cast went. So I'll back in a moment for you, but probably about 3.5 hours for me. So back in a moment. And we're back. The next 2 molds to be cast, the forms and the items are all on their glass pieces. I did want to mention, if you use a piece of glass, make sure that it's clear glass and does not have a pebbled texture to it, because that kind of defeats the purpose. When I was looking around for some smaller pieces, I did find an unused picture frame, but the glass had an etched surface to it, so that it was more of a matte look than a nice flat shiny look. Now you can use plexiglass as well, though I'm not 100% sure regarding how well the plexiglass will stay flat, or if there's any interaction of the silicone chemically with the surface of the plexiglass. So personally, I'm sticking to glass. Now, I was able to get 45 psi, and I kept the pressure up for an hour, which was its cure time, but over the last hour and a half, the pressure has dropped, looks like down to around 22 psi. So I'm definitely going to have to do something with that leaky pressure relief valve. So let's go ahead and relieve some pressure. And I can use my little piece here now that it's low enough. I don't have to keep holding. So we're down to 0. Let's crank it open and take a look at our result. Okay, looks pretty good. Get that set down. Yep, everything's all set up. It's nice and hard. There's a little globby that dripped out on me, but and that's all nice and set up. So good. It's not too many visual bubbles in the surface. There's a little bit where I scraped off that slumped but didn't merge flat. Let's see if I can break it off the wall there. Yep, it's coming off. Okay, let me pause momentarily and I'll detach the cardboard tube from the glass. I'll just use my cutter to break the bond there, but I need 2 hands to do that, so back in a moment. And the small mirror has been removed. A little bit of creep of silicone underneath the edge, so that'll have to be trimmed off, which isn't too bad. Same with the around the edge of the cardboard tube. It did move slightly, as you can see, as I was removing it off the mirror. However, the friction of the surface area is too great and I can't actually force it out, so I'm going to have to cut the tube to open it up to be able to pop the mold out. So I'll do that and bring you back in a moment. And everything's been separated now. So I use the bandsaw to very gently cut the cylinder, and that was after I had already, with the tank still in place with an X-Acto blade, trimmed the excess flash off the mold, and with it still in place also trimmed the other excess flash off the other end. So there's the little ring that was the overmold onto the bottom of the surface there, and as well getting the glue out of the way. so that it couldn't interfere with the cut. Now, let's take a look at the mold itself. The walls are nice and smooth. I'm not seeing any air bubbles or any hint of an air bubble present. The bottom we saw before. There's no couple little craters from air bubbles, but nothing extreme. And down the mold itself, I'm not observing any air bubbles at all, so it turned out to be a very good mold. The silicone is holding its oval shape without the cardboard cylinder being around it, so that is very positive, and a verification that you need the thicker wall, even though it takes more of your casting part A and part B to do. It's better if you're going to generate more than a one-off of casting what you've just made a mold of, to go with the thicker wall just so that it will maintain. I had no issues popping the tank out. Again, just holding it and pushing on the bottom, it just popped right out, and then I was able to pull it out of the mold. So all in all, very happy with this mold creation of that tank. It looks good. I'll go with the other mold to make the liquid plastic resin. We'll do the other mold in this mold. So now I'm going to go ahead and cast this part and cast this. Now on these two parts, because there's a lot of on this one, the indentations as far as the wood grain and such, and the crevices, I am going to use some of the ease release on this, and I think since I'm going to be spraying there, I'm going to spray this piece as well, as there are overhangs and such on it, just to ensure that the silicone mold won't get trapped into any crevices and hang up. But that you'll see in a later video once it's all done. I just wanted to show using the pressure pot for the first time, and apart from finding out I've got a leaky safety valve, overall it worked out very well. And here's one of our little doggies. This is Coco. Coco, what are you doing down here? There's our other dog now, Claire. So Claire's our older girl and Coco's our younger. And there in January of this year we lost our eldest, which was Chrissy, which was the miniature poodle. So just the two girls now. So they're coming down to find out what I was doing with the bandsaw, because I cut their chews on the bandsaw. So they're figuring that I was doing something for them, and they're wanting shares. But anyway, till later, on the next video, I'm Dave. Bye for now. A little bit of a postscript on the plumbing aspect of the pressure pot that I wanted to update you on. I was having an issue with leakage, air leakage specifically, that it just wasn't holding air, and I found that the valve that was supplied with the pot itself and this is more for pushing paint out into a spray gun, that the fittings that come with the regulator, when I use some soapy water on them, I was seeing a lot of leakage off the fittings, and even on the tank fitting itself. Now these fittings are, I don't know if they use like a Loctite type of component where you actually have to heat up around the joint where the fitting is for it to really release, so you can turn the fitting to remove it. So just for anybody that wants to use a pressure pot, take some soapy water once you've got it set up and check it, because I was seeing a lot of leakage. Now what I did was just go directly with a male fitting, and I've got a regulator with the male and female on it, so that I can move the regulator to different places in my air system, so I can control the output and not have to worry about it. That allows me to, in this case, use it here, or if I want to use my airbrush, I can just put it in line with the tank, the supply tank and compressor prior to the airbrush, and dial it down to 12 psi type of pressure. And in this case, I can connect it up and dial it up to 60 psi. Now, I wasn't too worried about not using the air relief valve, because when I got very much considering how I'm using this tank, my compressor is maximum of 80 anyway, which is the rating of the pressure pot. However, I'm going through a regulator, and more often you're using a pressure relief valve when you're not supplying the air through a regulator to whatever the vessel is. And I've, of course, going to be watching this. I'm pressurizing it up, and then I'm shutting the pump off, so it's only going to go up to the point where the regulator plateaus the pressure, and then the system's going to be turned off. What I did do was I turned my valve from the inlet side prior to the regulator, because it was being pretty useless, because the regulator won't allow it to depressurize from the upstream side, and I just put it on the downstream side, and this is where I had to heat the fitting to pull the 90-degree fitting that was in this position out. And that's pretty much the modification. So I left the elbow on so that it was pointing essentially away when I slowly cracked the valve to release pressure. And it does still leak a slight bit. I'm wondering if that's around the gasket seal. But over a 10-hour period, it went from 60 psi to 25 psi. So that's still holding enough pressure for a cure time on a silicone mold. And that's kind of my postscript to this casting video. So bye for now, till the next video.